Okay, so moving on to part two, figured I would break this up a little bit. So part two is to talk about the last couple questions. The sales plan piece was probably the piece most folks struggled with uh, of this particular case. So question four is the sales plan. And if you did a full-on sales plan, including the financials, which is kind of what the question asked for, to kind of break down the financials and figure out if you would be able to get to that $50 million, then that's great because that's what it was looking for. However, if you did not, I'm not going to necessarily take off a million points for that because this is not a finance course. And we don't offer accounting as part of our curriculum in this program, so I'm not going to go and take a bunch of points off for that. But I do want to talk a little bit about what it was that we were trying to get at here. So there was a document in the classroom. Hopefully you saw it that talked a bit about. And I have it here, although you're probably, the front of it looked like this. And this is the back. It talked a little bit about how to get to the gist of question number four. And so what you wanted to do was take some of those case study exhibits and figure out approximately, how many hospitals, what is the range of, population, range of ED visits, those types of things, and break that down. So, as it talks on our document here, it says, you need to take the average non-metropolitan population and the average population served by the small rural hospitals, and then with that info, you can determine that range of potential revenue for the documentation product. So this here is giving you those assumptions that have been calculated. So up here, we've taken the range of non-metropolitan population across the 6 states, the number of small rural hospitals, the range of population served, the range of ED visits, and then also the population in various counties, number of counties, etc. And then calculated out some of that particular information. So this is obviously, kind of a bunch of math that a lot of people are not big fans of math, but we'll calculate out exactly how many, what are the range of visits, those types of things. So we could figure out, we know that our documentation product is based on the number of visits, the number of, kind of hits based on physician documentation, nursing documentation, etc., discharge summaries printed. So it's based on those number of hits. So I'm going to scroll down a little bit here. So moving forward, we do have information on the number of hospitals we've determined. We know how many hospitals ECG already has in these target markets, and how many our competitors have, and then how many are unserved that are either employing their own docs, etc. And then potential average documentation revenue per hospital. So we have that range of ED visits that we've calculated up here based on our calculations that we created. So we have that range of ED visits, and then our potential revenue based on those figures that were provided in the case study. So we have our potential revenues and then also an average based on that range of revenues. So just calculating out a potential average reimbursement revenue per hospital as well. So then moving forward, obviously, moving kind of into question 4 talks about all the developing all of the possible sales plans. So if you had multiple options um, for strategic options, so maybe one of your strategic options was to simply increase staffing, you would want to put some thought around how you would increase staffing, maybe across all 6 states, and include the MDOC product for free as a value add, but then approach larger hospitals to sell MDOC to as an upsell to as a standalone product to increase revenue to meet that $50 million. Or maybe your strategic option was to sell staffing and the MDOC as standalone products. So whatever your strategic options were, in question 4, you would kind of develop these financial models for, or you could just talk about them. That would be fine too. Either option, you're kind of supposed to put some thought around: is it possible to get to that $50 million with the numbers that we have? Then in question 5, you want to put together a strategic plan to try and reach that goal. I apologize. I'm going to reach for my questions here. I've managed to cover them up. So you want to think about what strategic options do you want to follow to get to that goal. So what really are your strategic options at that point to try and reach that goal to get there by 2008? What are you going to do to get there by 2008? There's discussion of hiring other sales staff. Do you want, if you're going to diversify into all of the 6 states, do you want to think about having another administrative office in a different state? What are your strategies to diversify the operation if you're going to go that route? What are your options? And then the 6th question has to do with marketing and sales tactics. And generally, the biggest comment that we've had and that I've had over time on this particular question has to do with, there's a lot of discussion about different marketing and sales tactics you can take. But probably the biggest thing is that they've been very successful with their current marketing and sales tactics. They're very good at it. They're very good at being personable. Steve is very good at cold calling, walking into facilities, calling facilities. He's very personable. They take a very personable approach for the CEO. Steve, they take a very one-on-one, kind of a hometown type approach, and do a very good job at that. So they need to maintain that because that is a differentiator in the marketplace. So they need to maintain that even if and when they do bring on other folks. They need to maintain that and keep that as a difference. It's a difference maker for them. So that is one of their definitely needs to be keep them different and something unusual for them in the market. So not to breeze through the rest of those, I don't want to keep you on here too long. But probably the biggest thing are these financials from the documentation, reimbursement, additional staffing, growth models perspective. So it's just that sales plan is probably the thing that tripped folks up the most. Just kind of as an epilogue to this case, this is a real case. These cases that we look at are real. People wrote them that had real experience with them. And for, like I said, just as an epilogue, they actually did not meet the $50 million sales goal. They were somewhere more in the $26 million range. But interestingly enough, their option was not to sell the documentation product separately, except as a kind of a standalone product to folks that did not have their staffing services. So if they had the staffing service, they included it, but they did sell it as a standalone product for folks that didn't have their staffing service, and they did not meet their goal. I have to wonder if they had sold it as a standalone product or as an upsell to their staffing model, if they would have gotten closer to the goal. Because to me, that's a great upsell, and maybe they should have considered that. I will I'll end our recording now. Any questions on these on the staffing or on the sales plans? I'm happy to share some of these documents with you, some of this information in here. I'm happy to talk through them with you, but it's just kind of a matter of working through the numbers in that are available in the case study, and then just thinking about, okay, how can how can we get closer to this $50 million figure moving forward, and determining what strategy you want to take. Thanks so much, and see you all in Blackboard.